in Bath is about to be a part of our community. I just left, I spoke about 8 o'clock this morning at a function downtown for stem cell research across our world. And it's an amazing, amazing thing. And it's just another example of the amazing progress that is being made throughout our world in so many different areas. I have a vested interest in the regenerative process and the stem cell transplants, etc., for a personal reason within our family. But I have an amazing appreciation for what you do because you establish the foundation for all of these amazing things that are going on by being able to, teach and motivate and inspire young people to move forward in their lives and to continue the great research and all that takes place in our country to allow all these positive things to take place. And Janice said, I have an appreciation for teaching and learning, and it's not, it's not just the football field. That's certainly a part of it. But, my history goes back. I taught 9 years at the high school level and 1 year at a college level, small college. And I learned to have a great appreciation, at that particular point in time of the direction of the youth of our country. And times have changed. We all understand that. Your classroom is different than the classroom, and I noticed that you have I looked over the lectures that you're going to have, or the conference material, and you're addressing those types of things. But it was interesting. I went to finish my undergraduate degree work at William Jewell College in Liberty, Missouri, which I have a great deal of respect for. Wonderful, wonderful college for all the right reasons. And being a liberal arts college, you had to have a foreign language. Now, you have to understand, when I came out of high school, my GPA was probably not one that I would like to speak highly of. When I went to Jewell, you had to have a foreign language, and I had not taken a foreign language. That was way out of my territory in high school. So I became a student of, not a student as you would know it, but I was just in the classroom in Spanish classes. And you had to take 2 semesters of Spanish or of a foreign language, and I chose Spanish. And at the end of the 2 semesters, and teaching at that time was not verbal Spanish, it was kind of write it on the board and read it out of a book. And I was within 2 semesters of having a minor in Spanish. So I went ahead and took the additional 2 classes. So I had 16 units of Spanish. I had no clue what Spanish was all about, or how to teach or how to address the language and speak it. So I left William Jewell College. I went to Gallatin, Missouri, and that was my first teaching experience. I was a classroom teacher for 4 classes a day. I was coaching because at that time that was my major interest, and I was coaching football and men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, track. I drove the school bus, true story, and I made $3,600 a year, and I thought I died and gone to heaven. Until they assigned me the classes. And you can imagine what those classes were, right? I was the only faculty member there that happened to have any inkling of Spanish on my record. So I was assigned 3 first-year Spanish classes and 1 second-year Spanish class. Now, Gallatin, Missouri is a small town, and K through 12 was all in the same building. And the largest class I had 7 students in it, and the smallest had 4, so it ranged in between. And I was conscientious. I wanted to do well. I had no idea, they were ahead of me if they had a book. So when I finally got the book, then I really committed a great deal of time. And a wonderful lady at the time who had lost her husband. She was in her 80s at the time, and they had lived on a farm, and they moved back into Gallatin, the town, small town, and bought a place right next to the high school, or to the school, because it handled all the grades. So her name was Sarah Witt, and I loved her dearly. She was an amazing woman. And so I rented a room from her. And so I was very close, and I could get back, and every single night when I would come home, and you have to understand, she came off of the farm. And so they had a reasonably large, probably 6-seat table in her kitchen, and she would fix dinner for me every night. And I'm not a dinner eater. And it would be full of food. I mean, the entire table, it was like we were going to feed 6 people or more. And I felt so guilty if I didn't eat it. So I would try to eat everything that she put out there for me, and it just, it almost wore me out, because when I eat, I get tired. And I needed to stay up to study Spanish. But I would stay up until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, just trying to stay a step ahead of the students in the classroom. Well, at the end of the year, I thought, okay, I'm going to move on, and I went to Eastern New Mexico University after that first year of teaching to get my master's degree. And I got that in 2 semesters, and so I thought, okay, let me try this coaching and teaching thing again at the high school, and so I put out the resume, etc., and I was invited to teach and coach at Indio, California. Now, I had never really been to California, certainly had not been in the desert. Indio is right next to Palm Springs, so it sounded nice when I heard that it was next to Palm Springs. So I went sight unseen. So they have those first meetings, right, for all the teachers and personnel at the high school. And y'all get together and they share a lot of information, and then you're on your way. And the next day they have those brief periods, maybe 15 minutes a day, where the students just go and get oriented to that particular class. So I had gone with the intent that I was going to teach mostly physical education classes and 1 math class. And the math part of it, I thought I could probably handle a very basic freshman math class. So after the teacher meeting, orientation meeting, the president or the principal pulled me aside and said, "Coach, said I'm going to have to take you out of that math class." And I thought, okay, that's not all bad. And he said, "We have a little bit of a problem here. We have an instructor who is going to have a child, and she's going to have to sit out the first semester of classes. And I would like for you to take one of her classes. I'm trying to distribute them. So in lieu of your math class, I'm going to ask you, because I've seen it on your record, that you teach Spanish." And I thought, wait a minute, this is what I just tried to get away from. Do I really want to do this? And he said, "Don't answer me now, but think about it and let me know tomorrow early, so that we can go ahead and process this." So I went where I was staying at the time, and I thought, really I've got 2 options. One is I can reject the offer, and I'll probably get fired, and I won't have a job, and school's starting, so what'll I do? And the other one is, I can just try to bear with it, do the best that I can. So I went back and I told him that I would do it. And so the following day, those orientation classes began. So I'm in the classroom waiting for the students to come in. And I think if I recall correctly, there were 35 or 37 students in the class. And so I had the names there, and it looked a little eerie to me when I saw the names themselves. Now, what you have to realize is that Indio, California is right in the heart of the Coachella Valley. And the Coachella Valley is where they had, all of the people that would come across the border and work in the fields. There's a dramatic amount of agriculture that goes on in that particular area. And so as students came in, I all of a sudden realized that I was going to be in trouble again. At the end of the day, I had, let me think back, I had 5 students who were English-speaking students, and all the rest did not speak English, only spoke Spanish. So I was trapped. I had, I thought there was no way out. So it was 15 minutes, and I had, I had thought about the presentation that I was going to make, and it was going to be in English, and now I was stuck. So I enlisted the aid of the 5 students to try to help me with the message, but they were, their hands were tied as well. So I went home that night, and I thought, okay, what am I going to do? So I went back the next day, and I had a map, and I had tables set up, and I had the entirety of the class divided up so that at each table there was one English-speaking student, and the rest were Spanish-speaking students. And I had planned out in written form and in very crusty Spanish instructions about what we wanted to do. And at the end of the day, what the plan was is to have the English-speaking students teach English to the Spanish-speaking students, and have the Spanish-speaking students teach Spanish to the English-speaking students, and I would monitor. And that's the way it went. So, and fortunately, that was the last time I taught that. Now, I taught some other things in the classroom, and I learned along the way that, really at the end of the day, it is very meaningful in the lives of young people. Now, you're at a different level than that, quite obviously. And I have, as I said, I have great admiration for you. It's a different time. And you're, what is your classroom like now? And it was different X number of years ago. We all recognize that. But I still have, we talk about the generation right now in front of us that sits in our classroom, being one of instant self-gratification. Isn't that what they say about them, all the time? And I certainly see that. I don't think it fits, everybody. It's a different glove for each individual. But you see some of it, and want it right now, and want it presented in a way that makes it easy for them to digest. And if they don't like it, they're going to move on, and not willing to put in the time and the effort that it takes to really master something that is could be very significant in their lives. Well, one of the things that when I came to Kansas State University and having a little bit of that background, one of the things that I realized very quickly was that there was a strained relationship between university and college faculty and athletic programs, and particularly what some people would call major sports in terms of college football and basketball, etc. And that wasn't as dramatic here as it was in other places, because when I came here, there was not a player in the program that had ever participated in a winning football game on the field. The best record of any individual in the room that I first met with youngsters was 0-27. That was a disaster. They had identified, at one point in time, they had identified Kansas State University as Futility U. When I came, the attendance at Kansas State University was 13,000. And all of that was before halftime. The NCAA rules at the time indicated that you had to have an average attendance of 19,000 in order to be accepted as what at that time was called the Division I school. We were in the Big 8 conference at the time. The Board of Regents was discussing, what to do about that situation. They had 2 options. One is they were going to either drop football from Kansas State University, or they were going to reduce Kansas State football to what was known at that time as Division II, smaller school. And the impact that would have had on this university and this community would have been amazing. I appealed to a lot of people, but I appealed to our fans. In our very first season here, we hit 19,000 average attendance, and it's grown ever since to sell-out crowds for a large number of years because of wonderful, wonderful people. But the thing that happened, as we grew, as I said, I have a great respect for what you do. I have great respect for our teaching faculty here at Kansas State University, and I learned very quickly just by surveying the landscape across the country as it related to college athletics and college football about the relationship between faculty and athletics, and it was so easy to see. It's so easy to understand, and I felt maybe more attuned to a faculty and their thoughts and philosophy about it than I did in regards to athletics. The first year that I was here, I first went to the Board of Regents. And the Board of Regents had hired me, but they didn't know who I was, really. But they consented to have me, and normally that doesn't happen. They consented to have me in front. They had in front of the board, and they had no idea, why I was there. And I went pleading for faculty raises, which had nothing to do, because we're a separate entity here, and had nothing to do with my salary or coach's salary. Okay, but it was about our faculty because of the impact that they had, and I shared with them my belief that as I viewed other schools across the country, that there are so many things in regards to facility and coaches' salaries, etc., that are way out of whack, with what a university is really all about, which is education of young people. And I believe that. I still believe that. I went back and I met with our faculty, and I shared exactly the same thing. I shared these things. I said, number one, I will do anything and everything that I can to help you in regards to any aspect of what you do on this campus to help young people, and that I have tried to pursue. I'm sure they won't listen to me, but I have tried to pursue faculty increases in salary for one reason alone. Not because of football, but because it helps you, and you're very, very deserving. And our faculty appreciated that a great deal. I also shared that I will never come into your classroom or your office or get on the telephone and ask for a special favor as it relates to any athletes in our program. I also shared that every young person in our program will come into your class. They'll take their hat off. They'll sit in the first 3 rows. They'll put both feet on the ground. At that time, they didn't have cell phones. That goes back quite a ways. But today, they understand no cell phones out and turned off. And if they have iPads, they're only out when the instructor wants them out to utilize. And that young man will come up and introduce himself to you after a class in the first week of classes, just to let you know that he is genuinely interested in your class, and that young man will be in class, and he will not be late. Now, our faculty appreciates that, and we keep track, and I'm sure that virtually all colleges, college universities you're from, that the athletic programs, keep track of attendance, etc. But we get responses, and faculty members don't have to do that, but our faculty, does, because they feel strongly about the relationship that we have. And so not only do we get attendance reports, but we also get, the reports in regards to how a young person is doing, not just the grades, but how he presents himself in the class, etc., etc. And that's so important to me. As I've said to young players in our program, the last thing you want to do if you're really trying to get an education is get on the wrong side of a faculty member or your instructor. And they all know who you are, and you go in and sit down, and so many cases, across our country, that faculty member is thinking, there's a young guy that's coming from a program that relishes entitlement, and that's what these young guys have come here with, that feeling and sensitivity of entitlement. coaches again, big salaries, and have nice facilities like what we have here. Now, when we first started, we didn't have any facilities. They were when I came down to see if I wanted to take the job, the athletic director at the time, Steve Miller, refused to show me our facilities, and he wouldn't think that would take place. But and at the end of the day, I came here because of people. I was at the University of Iowa, and I had been at the University of Iowa for 10 years. Loved Iowa City, loved the university, loved the people. And Steve Miller, the athletic director, had called me, or one of his people had called me when we had about 3 games plus a bowl game remaining in the season, and asked if I would come and interview for the job. And I said no, I would not. But it was because I had loyalty to the University of Iowa, and I wouldn't leave in the middle of the season. That would create great hardship for them. And so, a day later, Steve called back and said, would you come after your bowl game and interview? And I said, no, I really don't want to do that, because, if you don't like me or I don't like you, whatever the case may be, you have wasted so much time, probably a month and a half, that you could have probably hired somebody who'd be a far better coach than I would anyway, and you'd lose that opportunity and really put you behind the 8 ball. And so we left it at that. And 2 days later, Steve Miller's knocking on my door at Iowa City. And he's pretty persistent gentleman. He eventually went with Nike and had great success. He's been very successful and now a businessman. But, he came in and sat down, he visited, and he said, okay, the job is yours. There's no interview. You get the job. And after the bowl game, will you come and decide if you really want to take it? And I said, Steve, you're crazy, and you really hadn't ought to do that. But at the end of the day, I consented to do so. I came to Manhattan after our bowl game, my wife and I, and we met. I don't know if you've been over there, Jana. We met at what's called the Legends Room, which is the basketball arena across the way here. And there were a lot of people there, and Steve, of course, our president, John Weefald at the time, was there. A lot of other people, faculty members, and people of the community who were, had an investment in the program. So, and it was just dialogue and conversation, and they were trying to tell me all the good things about Kansas State University, which eventually I learned and realized what a special place it was. But I said, I asked John Weefald, Dr. Weefald, our president, I said, Dr. Weefald, would you have somebody take me onto our campus here in a little bit and let me out on the campus by myself for about an hour? Now, this is in December, and nothing that we've tried to do has affected the weather in Manhattan, Kansas. So it was cold out, it was nippy. So he wasn't sure why I wanted to do it, but he consented to do so, and had a young lady take me on campus. And I had never been on the campus before, dropped me off in the middle of the campus, and I stood on the campus, same spot, and talked with, I don't know, maybe 70 people, students that were moving from class to class, faculty members moving from building to building, staff, visitors to the campus. A lot of people, they didn't know me, I didn't know them, I didn't tell them why I was there, etc. But I stopped people and I just asked about the community, I asked about the university, I asked about the students, I asked about the faculty, I asked about anything that I could think of. And after an hour's period of time, they came and got me and took me back. And what really impressed me, and I told John Weefald that at the time, what really impressed me was, here it's cold, everybody's trying to get from one building to the next to get warm. Every single individual of those 70 plus or minus people that I visited with all stopped. All were very gracious, very courteous. Nobody got in a hurry. Everybody responded to my questions in a very positive way. And it impressed me a great deal. So I went back and I said, I'm going to think about it, for a day. But I was impressed with the people that I saw. And one of the things that I've always said, I came to Kansas State University because of the people. I stayed because of the people. We retired several years ago. When you get to be 100, you know, you retire. And so we retired for 3 years, but we stayed right here in Manhattan, Kansas. You know, we didn't, you know, run off to warm weather, California, Arizona, Florida, et cetera, et cetera. Stayed right here, and we stayed because of the people. And then I re-entered the profession and came back after 3 years, and the reason had nothing to do with football. You know, everybody wants to say, you know, he missed it so much that he, you know, had to come back, and that wasn't the case at all. I came back for one reason, because of the people, and that was the young people that played the game, and the fact that people in our community, people that supported Kansas State, wanted that to take place, and consequently it did. They probably will regret it, you know, at some point in time here, but by the same token, it is all about people. And the idea, as I said, that, you know, schools, you know, it's kind of, athletics has gotten out of hand. I'm a proponent, and you could probably go online and see, you know, I think the headlines that ESPN and many others write about, Snyder says that collegiate athletics has sold out. And I'm not afraid to speak my mind in that respect, and I believe that to be the case. I think, you know, we have beautiful facilities here. Okay, that is, and I have an appreciation for them. But to me, that wasn't necessary. You know, I was not a big proponent, you know, of all of that. You know, what was important to me, as all I've ever said in terms of facilities, you know, is you know, I want to make sure that the young people in our program and the coaches in our program and our staff, that we have an efficient place in which to do what we do. But I also know that, you know, and I knew this a long time ago, you know, if you're a faculty member, you know, you're sometimes stuck in a building that's 120 years old, you got an office that's the size of a closet, your salaries are 1/10 of what you deserve, and that makes that so easy to have the impression of an athletic program that it is that entitlement and all that goes along with it. So, you know, I side with that. I send our faculty members state of the program letters and emails that go out 4, 5, 6 times a year, and they're pretty extensive, just explaining all the things that we do in our program. You know, they can see what happens on the field, but all the other things, you know, what our students do, what our football student athletes do, how they do in the classroom, GPAs, et cetera, community service work that they do, all the things that they do because they are learning a value system within the program at Kansas State University. We have 9 full-time coaches on our staff, full-time assistants. Everybody does. And each one of those assistants is assigned to a college on our campus. We have now 10, but we had 9 initially for a long period of time. We had 9 colleges at Kansas State University. So we have a coach that's responsible for the College of Engineering, one that's responsible for the College of Business, et cetera, et cetera. And they interact with the deans of those colleges. They call, they invite them over, they go visit with them, they take them to lunch. I invite them all to be on our TV show, and with no thought or dialogue about football, but all about their college, and to be able to sell their college on air, which goes all across the country. We invite, my wife and I have a suite up here, and we bring the deans and associate deans into Kansas State's football games to be in our suites. The coaches that interact with each of the deans have a form that they have to fill out. And that form identifies, you know, all the dialogue that takes place between that dean and our coach returned to me, so I get a good understanding of what goes on. I've been fortunate to have a wonderful relationship with each and every one of them, and consequently we've had a wonderful relationship with the faculty here at Kansas State University. So, and I, you know, that where we say college athletics is sold out. I certainly haven't changed my mind at all about that. And again, we're kind of a living example of it in that respect. I've said so many times, I make far more than I'm worth, I can assure you that. But the one thing that I've never done, I've never asked for, in my entire time here, 20, whatever it is, 7 years, something like that, 25 years, I've never asked for a raise, not one time. And there were, obviously a number of opportunities where I could. That wasn't significant to me. And when those opportunities, based on the athletic department and board of regents wanted to do that, I always tried to reflect that to areas of our university that were significant, in the education of young people and in our program. Our university has, it's pretty prolific in the field of research, throughout the world, for that matter. But one thing that I always share, with anybody and everybody that will listen to me, is what an amazing and wonderful teaching faculty that we actually have. And I have a great appreciation for that aspect. We have to have the research. Research is so significant. I just left. I spoke a little bit earlier. My voice is about to go. This is my third this morning already, but I spoke to a group of scientists, some of them from here at Kansas State University, from all over the country, who are invested in stem cell research, which is has an amazing impact, on the lives of people across our country. But and so the research is really significant and important. But teaching young people and the interaction that you as a faculty member, staff member, have to impact the lives of young people is an amazing, amazing thing. And I'm sure you receive from young people that have come through your classes or through your school, who you've interacted with, have been able to say to you, wow, you had a dramatic impact on my life. Now, some of them don't quite always get it, but there's going to be a time in their lives when they will. And that has been, a blessing here, and that's what's kept me here. I have, we've moved, because of this facility thing. I've moved my office in the last 12 months 3 times, and I'm a pack rat. Okay, my wife, gets upset with that. She's as bad as I am, but she doesn't mention that. But I save everything. I've got the first notebook that we had at Kansas State. I've got the first letter I wrote out a copy of. I've got the first letter I received, etc. I save it all, and we've got boxes and boxes of stuff. I'm having a hard time staying up with where it is now because we've made so many moves. We've got rooms upstairs that are designated for other things that are just full of boxes of stuff that belongs to me. But a significant part of that are those large moving boxes that are full of correspondence. I save all the correspondence, letters I get, letters I send, copies of, etc. But they're absolutely full of it. I would suggest maybe there's 20 boxes, those large boxes full of that. Be it emails or cards, letters, whatever the case may be. And what's really significant, what's heartwarming to me, and what makes it so significant in my life is the same thing that you can and will hear, from students that you have. And it's that thank you. It's thank you. And here's why. Because of what I learned and how it's carried over into my life and allowed me to have success in, whatever those things are that are important to it. And some of those letters say, Coach, I didn't get it then, but I get it now. So that's that old adage of it's never too late. And I guess my thought is you have an impact. You can say, well, we're not coaches. You're the coach. Listen, just as many people go through the education system as far more than actually go through a football program. So you do have that opportunity to have that kind of an impact on the lives of young people. And it's, it's kind of that, and it's hard. It's a little easier, where I stand. Everybody expects football coaches to be gruff and rough and all that goes along with that, and demanding. And I won't say that I'm not demanding. I am pretty demanding. I'm demanding because I think I have a pretty good idea of what's in the best interest of young people, and sometimes it's a little harder to get to, and you can be one of two things and allow some things to take place that you really would hope that they wouldn't get involved in, or you can be demanding. The old tough love thing, And to me, even though sometimes those of instant self-gratification want to balk at that, there comes a time in their life when they realize the value of it. I always tell the story and it's kind of relative to football, but to me it was relative to life. We've had a couple of young guys that have experienced and at least expressed this to me. One of them, a young fellow, those of you Kansas State professors here may remember, we had a young man by the name of Terrence Newman. He was in fact, John McGraw. John McGraw was from Riley. Riley is where, in fact, I have a daughter who is teaching at the elementary school there and absolutely loves it. So teaching is kind of, I guess, in the blood. I have a son who coaches on our staff here as well. But John was a walk-on in our program from Riley High School, and then Terrence Newman was a young guy that came to us from Salina, Kansas. Neither one of them recruited by anybody. And both of them went into the NFL. Well, Terrence was with the Dallas Cowboys at the time that I returned the second stint at Kansas State. And so when I came back, I said to my son Sean, who's on the staff here, as associate head coach, he actually runs the program, and I said, Sean, let's go to Dallas and watch the state high school championship games. It was at the old Jerry Jones, it wasn't Jerry Jones at that time, the old Dallas Cowboy Stadium, which is another one of those things, perfectly amazing place. They just blow it up. If you know Jerry Jones, you understand why. So anyway, we went down, and before we got on the plane, Sean called Terrence, and he was living in Dallas at the time, and said, Terrence, Dad and I are coming down. We're going out to the stadium. Would you come out and you want to come out and we'll just visit? I said, great. So we got on the floor of the stadium, and we were there through, I think, 3 championship games. And so we were there for maybe 5-6 hours, something like that. And Terrence and Sean and I, and we just had dialogue. But while we were talking, catching up on old times, Terrence said, Coach, he said, I want to thank you for something. And in my imminent rudeness, I said, I interrupted him. I said, you don't have to thank me for anything, Terrence. Everything you've done on your own. He said, Coach, just let me finish. He said, when I left Kansas State and went with the Dallas Cowboys, he said, and that they train in Thousand Oaks, California, and there's a college there, and so all the players stay at the dormitory, one of the dormitories at the college. He said, after the very first practice we had, he said, I went back to the dorm, and he said, I packed my clothes. He said, I realized at the time they were all bigger, they were faster, they were stronger, they were just better than I was. And then I got to thinking, you aren't going to like this, if I do this. And he said, I got to thinking about our core value system, which, by the way, is on that board over there. And that's more about life than it is about football. And he said, I said, I got to go back. And so he said, I went back. He said, now, I didn't unpack my bags. He said, but I went back. He said, after the 4th practice, after day 3, 4th practice, so I had a 2-a-day in there, he said, I came back and he said, I unpacked my bags. He said, I knew at that time I was going to make it. He said, Coach, he said, things didn't change in regards to them still being better, still being faster, still being stronger. He said, but they didn't have something that I had. He said, they didn't have that value system that I was taught here at Kansas State University. They didn't have that work ethic. They didn't have that commitment. They didn't have that responsibility and all those things that we list up here And that meant a lot to me. And he said, I went back, and obviously he became an all-pro player. He's in his 15th year of NFL football. John McGraw was 9 years with the Kansas City Chiefs, came back, shared exactly the same story with me. We had a young guy that, it was of interest, a fellow by the name of Rock Cartwright. Sounds like he should have been on television, right? But that was his name. And Rock was 5'9" tall. Walked on into our program, came out of Texas, and didn't get drafted as the other guys did. Terrence didn't, John McGraw didn't, but Rock went into the NFL as a free agent, and he went with the Oakland Raiders. He's been with the Oakland Raiders for 16 years. He has never started a game in his life. Plays off and on. Why do they keep him? Why do they pay him those substantial dollars? It's because of the kind of individual that he is. We read about it in college athletics as well as NFL. You tell me a day that you can pick up a paper and there isn't an article in there about a college athlete, a college football athlete, or an NFL athlete who hasn't been arrested for something. Whether it happens to be drugs, whether it happens to be, weapons charges, whether it happens to be theft, whatever it is. I mean, every single day. An article. I had somebody upstairs because our players just came back from a short break that they get before they started summer school. And I had a meeting with them, and I wanted to present just exactly that element of it, because we have new young guys visiting, the old hats, understand what we expect of them, but we addressed the issue of all that's taking place across our country. And if you're an athlete, it just gets elevated. I mean, it's not that other people don't get in trouble and do the same crimes, but, if you're an athlete, obviously everybody knows. And so it gets out in the media. So they put together, and I've got a stack of articles, that go back and just list, so-and-so from such and such a university arrested for this, so-and-so from this university arrested for this. And that just heightens, the feeling that a faculty can have about a program and saying, hey, you let these guys run wild. I know one of our major universities in our conference is going through some real difficult times with that right now, and you can see the impact that it's having. Dramatic. Well, they had and I knock on wood all the time, but they did an article here 2 years ago, I believe, and it was part of that I read to our players. They went through and listed every single college Division I playing football programs in the country, 127 of them, I think. Okay, and they put them in order of most arrests to the least arrests. Okay, and that's how high profile, athletics has become. And it was over a 5-year period of time. And they listed how many arrests they had, and they started with the university that led, the nation with 32 arrests out of a program, and then it went on down. Kansas State University was not on the list, and I'm awfully proud of that. And there were a couple other universities, and there were a couple other Big 12 universities that weren't either, and I admire and appreciate that. And I know, as they say, stuff happens. I get that. But by the same token, it's a matter of being able to work at it and make a value system really important. And as I was trying to say a minute ago, you sometimes get your hands tied, in regards to that. I would have a hard time being in the classroom right now because of the restrictions that seemingly are placed on faculty and how you relate a value system to young people in your program. And it probably varies university to university. I probably have more leeway in that respect. People, if you were to say the Lord's Prayer in your classroom, you'd be selling insurance tomorrow. We say the Lord's Prayer when after a ball game, if we choose to do so. Now somebody may want to call you on it, but so be it. We have a little bit more freedom, as I say. But that also gives me the opportunity to try to impose a value system that is significant in the lives of young people to become successful, not in football, but with their family, with their education, with their career fields, with their faith, whatever it is that's important to them. I always encourage young people in our program to, and I understand they have a lot of priorities, but I hope, and what I try to share with them is I hope that those priorities, while they're here at Kansas State University and then eventually beyond, would consist of partially of their faith and their family and being the best person and being the best student and then being the best football athlete that they can possibly be. And it's our role, it's my role to try to identify, create, and forward, the values that allow young people to be successful in those areas. And we're all the same. When I say we're all the same, in a certain degree. Everybody in this room is different. Every single one of us is different. Always have been, always will be. But there are certain things, a few things that we have in common. And one thing that we have in common, every single one of us, is we want to succeed. We want to be successful. We don't always say it, but it's there. We want to succeed in those things that are really significant in our lives. Teaching is part of it. Coaching is part of it. Families are part of it. Whatever it is that's significant in our lives, we want to succeed at it. And to me, there's a process about how that takes place. And there's a variety of different ways to do things. We all understand that. But I think to be able to define ways in which young people can latch on to something that gives them an opportunity to become successful. And as it relates to whether it's classroom, whether it's life, whether it's on the football field, we talk an awful lot. One of those goals up there talks about improvement. Becoming better every single day. Every single day. And you know what? When you think about it, and I'm sure all of you have the same process. First of all, that value system up there, that's not anything that you haven't tried to teach your children and won't try to teach your children. I mean, it's not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination. And to a lot of people, they're just words. For everything that's up there, we have a program in place to address each one of those. If it deals with the first one, commitment, we have a program to deal with commitment and how to teach commitment and how to get young people to learn how to be committed and what it actually means. We have a program for every single thing that is up there. But I mentioned improvement. And in this day and age, with the young people that you work with, improvement, is not necessarily on their agenda. Why? If we go back to that instant self-gratification, they're not willing to take it a step at a time. Their feeling is, I need it right now. If you can provide it right now, that's great. If you can't, let's move on to something else. And so it's trying to go from A to Z. Some of us get in that category sometimes as well. We're here and we want to be here. And that's the step we want to take. We want to take it one step, one stride. It doesn't work that way. We all understand that. If it's really significant and important in our life, it's going to take some time, it's going to take some effort, and sometimes the young people that you have don't, and the young people I have don't always want to expend that time and that effort that it takes. So we talk about daily improvement. I sit in the classroom with our players. I can remember the very first year that I was here, we had 47 players in our program on scholarship. You could have 95. We were less than 50% scholarship. We were and are the lowest scholarship program. That number was the lowest number of scholarship players that any program in the history of college football has ever hit. 47, magic number. I would sit in the classroom every single day with those young guys, and we would talk about their priorities. And then we would talk about how they could get better every single day in those priorities. And I would go around and I would call them out and I'd say, John, tell me one of your priorities. And he would give me a priority. Now, at first they thought, what's this guy all about? This guy's crazy. And, this won't last long. We'll wear him out. Well, I'm more persistent than that. So I would, but eventually they got it. And I would say, give me a priority of yours. And John would mention a priority. And I'd say, okay, you tell me what you can do today to become just that much better in that area of your life. Family, faith, studies, whatever. And he would think of something, and pretty soon you could see it, all of them were thinking, and pretty soon the words started coming out, and the words made sense. And what they were thinking is, here's a small thing. Okay? And so my approach to it was this, is that, if you just take that one step, just get it a little bit better. What could you do to be a better family member today? Well, when I leave here, I'm going to go call my mother. Okay, they didn't have cell phones then, so it wasn't as easy as it is today. Okay, but I'm going to go call my mother. Well, that made him a little bit better family person, and he could build on that the next day. And the next day we'd come back and do exactly the same thing. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and so on. And pretty soon they began to understand that, yes, I want to get here, and that there's little successes that I can have along the way. And in this day and age, that, I think, goes a long ways in being able to satisfy, that instant self-gratification, those needs to have those successes. It may not be way up here, but it's a little step closer and a little step closer. At the end of the day, is it related to football? When we would practice, I'd have all of our coaches, when they met with the players, that they would go through with each player and have that player define what it was that day that they wanted to improve upon. In other words, what was their kind of goal for the day. And they would define that. Then after practices, we had two exits to the locker room. And I would put coaches at one exit and I stood at the other. And the coaches wouldn't let anybody out, so all of them had to go through the door that I stood at. And every single one of them, I would ask a simple question. What was your goal today? What was it that you wanted to improve a little bit on? And then I would get into, did you make that improvement? Or did you not? And if you did, what's your goal going to be for tomorrow? And if you didn't, what can we do about making sure that you can reach that goal or that area of improvement on the football field the next day? Did it every single day that way. Now, at the end of the line, again, there were 47 young guys that were here on scholarship who had never participated in a football game at Kansas State University in which they had won. And that year, that first year, they won one ball game. Only one ball game. Everybody that I knew called me and said, Coach, you had better get out of there as quickly as you can, and you too will be an insurance salesman in a heartbeat. And I said at the very outset of those dialogues, I said, I've never been more convinced in my life that these young guys will be successful. And going into the season, that very first season, 1989, and I knew what we had, and I'm a very realistic individual as well, and I understood that the scoreboard was not going to be very gracious to us. That part I was pretty certain of. And I shared with our players, what was significant for me to be able to make an assessment of who they were and where they were was going to be on their basic improvement, their individual improvement. Okay, did you get better? Because that was our goal, to get better every single day. Did indeed you do that? And at the end of the season, as I approached them and anybody else that would listen, I felt strongly that we were going to have a successful program because I had seen that kind of improvement during that period of time. They were called the foundation of this program. If you were to go over to our indoor facility, you will see a big wall of brick. And I had installed the names of all of those players are on those bricks. And that represents the foundation of our program. That same group of young guys, the next year they won 4 games. then they won 5, then they won 7, and of course there are new guys coming into the program all the time that are embracing the foundation. Then they won, as I said, they won 7, then they won 9, then they won 10, then they won 11, 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 and then they won 11. Now, you know, as I say so many times, we didn't grow out of the sand like Las Vegas. You know, it was just gradual. It was the proof of the pudding. It was more, it wasn't intrinsic values at the time, things that you can't reach out and touch, but it was something, the result was something that you could actually see. And it was, you were a part of it, and it was present for you. And it was just that gradual improvement. And that kind of sent the message and sold the concept of let's take it a step at a time, a day at a time, and get ourselves better each and every day of our lives, each and every moment of our lives. So that's kind of our approach. I've talked way too long, and we have a young lady sitting right over here, a beautiful young lady, and a wonderful, wonderful person, and a great worker in addition to our program. Lauren is her name, and she is great. I mean, part of her job, she has some very needed administrative responsibilities for us, but she's also the best tour giver that you will ever experience in your life. And she's humble.
Before we go on the tour, Bill, I have to tell you a couple of things. Y'all, what are we trying to remember? The Big 12 is big on teaching and learning. And we're trying to get that message out. That we're big on teaching and learning.
And
you believe that.
I strongly believe that.
And Jim Kaufman spoke to us, and he says the core mission of any university is teaching and learning.
Right.
And Bill believes that too, and we believe that. And thank you so much.